Good evening. This is Life Live on episode 24. I got a little bit of a late start. Spreaker Live was giving me a problem. But I'm here. So I was unable to do an episode on Friday due to the hurricane. So I apologize, and I didn't get a chance to update it on the site. So I apologize for that. On this episode, I have titled it Broken. And one of the reasons I did that is because I had recently kind of done a search on Google just because I was curious as to what comes up when people search for suicide or why people are suicidal. The reason I did that is because if you're going through depression or you're feeling suicidal, one of the things most likely that you're going to do is turn to Google or, try to at least do a little bit of research to maybe search and understand why you have these feelings, if anybody else has these feelings, so on and so forth. And again, I didn't do a lot of research, but just merely due to time. But one of the things that I noticed is that there were two different pages that came up. I'm not going to give links or anything like that to them. I just merely want to go over kind of what they point out, in my opinion, and maybe talk a little bit about them. So one of them, let's see if I can find this here. Actually, both give a list as to why maybe people think or others think that people could be depressed, because it looks like both of these articles weren't written by someone who is going through it, but possibly dealt with people who have. And I'm not going to list all of the reasons, but some of the ones that I wanted to point out are, one is being that they're depressed, which makes sense. Another one indicates that they might be impulsive. Another one mentions that it could be for a cry for help. And another one that they mention is that they may have made a mistake. So on this particular site, just to kind of talk about these, just to point this out, and the reason I wanted to do this is to kind of, I think, put a light to, or shine a light to some of these descriptions and definitions, because again, these don't look like that they were written by, and I know this particular article isn't written by someone who was depressed. It was written by a doctor. So they might have, put together this list based upon maybe patients they have talked to or dealt with. But I think it's interesting to have an opinion of somebody who has gone through this as kind of an overlaying statement. So, in the one that states that they're depressed, well, to me this makes sense because this is part of what I went through. And it even states this is without question the most common reason people commit suicide. Severe depression is always accompanied by a pervasive sense of suffering, as well as belief that escape from it is hopeless. And it's a long paragraph, so I'm not going to read much more of that. But I think it hits on a few key things, right? Because a lot of people are depressed for a number of reasons, some of which they mention here. It's a sense of suffering. It can be a sense of belief that the whole world is kind of coming around them. And this is what I talked about or discussed last episode in 23. Excuse me. In regards to, if we are depressed and we are constantly looking down and we're not observing the world around us, the weight of the weight of the world on our shoulders and the darkness around us just kind of constantly pounds on us, and it can, bring us to being, just this ball that we feel is surrounded by nothing but darkness and there's no way out. So one of the reasons that I talked a lot about that in the last episode was because, there are things that we can do on a daily basis that can help us feel, even though internally and emotionally we might feel depressed, if being able to look up and look out and look around can make us realize that the world is larger than this void that we're living in, hopefully that can help bring some light to you. So, I've talked about depression being a big part of suicide. Primarily, again, I focused on it more from just feeling depressed, because I know depression can lead to suicide. A lot of it really comes down to, again, just feeling like there's nothing that we can do in our lives to make what's happening to us change, or the feelings that we're having change, and it's painful. And it brings us to a point where we just don't feel like things are going to get better. So we typically just try to find a less painful way out. So I agree that feeling depressed is part of this. And a lot of what I've talked about over all of these sessions is dealing with you internally as a person and hopefully bring you out of some of this depression that you're going through. The other one that I mentioned that they stated was they're impulsive. It's a short paragraph, so I'll just kind of paraphrase, but they're indicating that this can be often related to people who are involved with drugs and alcohol, and they're trying to find a way to impulsively attempt to end their own lives. Again, because it's been onset, or made us feel more comfortable when we're inebriated, to take on a task that is so detrimental to our lives, suicide, right? So typically when we're in some type of stupor, we're not completely thinking rationally, on top of the depression that we already have, the thoughts that we've had in the past regarding suicide and depression, and being inebriated or under the influence of whatever it is, can be a fast onset and a quick snap solution, and possibly an impulsive one to end our lives. So I had also mentioned in another episode regarding taking drugs and alcohol for a number of reasons. But again, if my main goal is to have you be able to focus on yourself and look inward, we can't do that when there are factors that we've taken upon ourselves to not be able to see clearly. A lot of the depression, the suicide, the loneliness, these thoughts that we feel inside come from external sources. So if we're trying to rebuild who we are and build on who we are inside, utilizing an external source to help us with that can be detrimental. Now, of course, I've mentioned looking up and around and appreciating the world around you. That's a positive thing. But trying to utilize, drugs or alcohol to bring you to a better place, it's not going to do that. And as I've mentioned in the other episode, it can become a crutch. If you find that drinking helps you relax, but it also makes you feel better, it's still making a chemical change in your body, and it's not allowing you to focus on you. We want to try to do that uninhibited. So we want to be able to focus on ourselves and the world around us without any mental impacted force. So being impulsive, Sure. If you're looking at it from the perspective as they have stated here. The other one that is mentioned is they're crying out for help. This I can see as well. And when I first started this, one of the things that I mentioned was being able to get your feelings that you have inside out in some form or fashion, whether it be writing, whether it be talking to yourself or your pet, even go as so far as to talking to a friend, a doctor, or even your parents, or another sibling. Clearly, these are things that are helpful, especially talking to your family can be helpful. However, going through what you're going through, it doesn't seem like a realistic choice sometimes. You might be in the situation you're in because of your family, and that can, of course, make it difficult to be able to sit down and talk to them, more or less, make things better. So I'm a firm believer in getting feelings out, and the reason is because if you don't, they become and begin to be bottled up, and then they can change, and then they become compounded. So what happens is, you might have started out with something very small or something that didn't seem as big of a deal, but now because of that and other things that are coming at you that you're not able to express your feelings about, it just becomes compounded and everything becomes worse, and you become more sensitive and susceptible to negative feelings or a negative external impact. So it's beneficial, to get it out in some form or fashion, whether it be through, you playing a musical instrument, something, I don't care what it is, but as long as it's something that gives you an emotional outlet. So if talking is that, perfect. If writing it out works, perfect. If you haven't even tried anything and you think it might sound silly, at least try it, because it's impressive on what it can do. And again, it's not just one thing. I mean, some people find that writing and talking help. It doesn't have to be more than one thing. I think it's important just to find at least one thing that can help you, that can be an outlet. I don't care if it's a wall, but it really comes down to getting it out. If you think about it, we could take any small instance in our daily lives and constantly keep poking at it if it's not brought to anyone or anything's attention. And I mean by this, it could be something very small. Let's say that, every day you walk into let's say every day you walk into your bedroom, you get poked on the shoulder. Okay. And, at first it doesn't bother you because it's just, one poke. And then tomorrow it's, another poke. And then a week goes by and it's another poke. The point is over time, something that is so small can become very aggravating pretty quickly. And so, if we use this simplistic and possibly ridiculous example, as a year goes by, if you know that every single time you walk in your room you're going to be poked, most likely, not only are you going to be aggravated, but you're also probably going to spend less time in your room just to avoid it. So when we try to apply that same concept in the aspect of getting your emotions out, just think about it. I mean, we're talking about one aspect, right? We're talking about one event that happens once a day, one time when you walk in your room. Now, if we think about our emotional ups and downs and our feelings and what we go through in a single day, and we compound that over a week, a month, a year, we're not just talking about one simple thing. We're talking about hundreds or thousands of things. And if we don't find a way to get those out and to get the feelings that we have about this out, it allows us to shut down in the same way that we would, possibly stop going into our room as often if we know that we're going to get poked every single day. So if we can prevent that, then most likely we'll just avoid it. Well, if we start to avoid feelings and we start to avoid things in our lives that matter, i.e. us deep down inside, well, then we're not able to really deal with that solution. So when I talk about, and specifically directed to the statement of people crying out for help, if you can't find a way to, again, relieve some of this anxiety and stress and feelings that you've got, you might, it could come down to, again, feeling that there's no way out. It's going to impede on your livelihood of feeling better. If anything, it's going to make you more depressed. And, I would hate to think that you've ended your life because it was a cry for help. And so we need to find ways to get it out. At least out. I mean, a cry for help can be many different things. For some people, it literally is a cry for help or a vendetta. And some people will think that, well, I'll teach these people who are making fun of me, or I'll teach this ex-girlfriend of mine that she realizes, what she's missing, or, thinking that you're going to hurt someone by taking your own life, by getting back at them. In reality, it doesn't work like that. Every day and every minute that goes by, things become less and less important. And so, if your cry for help is an indirect way, or if your suicide is an indirect way of crying for help, well then, at least getting the emotions out can be a positive thing for you. And I'm trying to stay on track without going on tangents, but it's difficult. So if we think about, one of the examples that I gave was taking your own life to get back at someone. This is something that really resonates with me because during my multiple years of depression and suicide, I had been through certain events where I had often thought, well, if I take my life, I'll teach this person a lesson. And if I look back now, not only from that moment of what I was going through, but just life in general, when I look back on life, like most everybody experiences, what's important then is not important now. Now, of course, there are certain things in life that will remain a constant importance as you grow. Family, emotions, children, what have you. But if I were to look back and ended my life to affect one or multiple people that I was trying to affect, most likely, if it would have affected them, it wouldn't have affected them for long. Nor would it have ever had the impact that I would have hoped that it would have. Now, I can't say that that would apply to everyone because I don't know you or your friends or, what it is, but I can just tell you from personal experience, people grow all the time. And so when we think about, is suicide and taking my life going to teach somebody a lesson? Possibly, but it's not going to be to the factor that you think it would. Which in return, that's a whole nother topic I can go on. It's a whole nother episode I could go on as far as revenge, so to speak. Because if, we're looking at doing things to get back at people, that's something that you have to learn to let go of. In this particular example, though, I'm referring to it as being a cry for help. It's difficult. I mean, if again, we're going back to a scenario of, maybe an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend. Well, the likelihood of you being able to sit down and talk with them is probably not going to be an option, unless they were longtime friends and you still have a good relationship. However, it is something that you should still get out, because otherwise it will just fester. Whether it be friends that you've got, or again, talking to a wall, or writing it down, or whatever it might be. It is an emotion that we have to get out. And a cry for help indirectly is a way of having someone listen so that we can get what's inside of us out. And in some cases, of course, we might want to talk to someone so we can get feedback on what you're going through and so on and so forth. But I still think it's a very important to at least get these feelings out, to get it out there. Okay. The other one I mentioned was, I can't remember if I did this one or not. I know I mentioned they've made a mistake. One of the other ones that were listed on here that I don't remember if I picked out or not was they have a philosophical desire to die. That can also take a ton of time. But in the end, it still deals with how you feel internally. Now, as far as this is a statement from someone who necessarily hasn't been in the situations that we have been, stating they have a philosophical desire to die, I think could possibly be true, right? Because it depends what you're doing it for. Is it, again, to get back at someone? Is it for notoriety? Is it for popularity? What is the purpose? And if you believe revenge, in this example that I've been talking about recently, is a philosophical reason or desire to die, is it? I mean, is the person or people that you're trying to hurt really worth your own life? And the answer is always emphatically no. Because you are the only person that's important to you. And it's key that I keep saying that, because it really is. Of course we have people in our lives that we rely on. And of course we're going to have people in our life that are going to rely on us. However, it is still extremely important to be you and to find you. That way you can be present for everything else in your life that you experience. All right, let me go and look at one other list that I had found. This is also a doctor who made a statement on this, and they have a couple different ones that I'll point out. So the list that they've got is hopeless, helpless, powerless, useless, worthlessness, purposelessness, meaningless, and pointless. So, I'm not going to necessarily touch on all of those because it's already been 24 minutes, but they all kind of coincide with what I've talked about and kind of with each other. And if we take a look at hopeless, if you're someone that's hopeless, it's most likely because of not feeling like there's a way out. And if you try to, look at your life now and think about where it's going to go, if you're someone who's depressed and you're feeling hopeless, you're probably looking in the future and just thinking, there's no way in the world I can continue to live like this. There's no way in the world I can continue to go day by day and feel like this. So you become overwhelmed and it seems like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, and it feels hopeless. Well, again, a lot of what I've talked about is finding you and finding your worth, and then adding to that by looking and thinking about things that you didn't notice about you, and growing on them, right? And then it also, I've talked about being able to look up and around the world around you at your life and finding things that are important, or at least recognizing things that you didn't recognize before, because everything in a day is new. Now, yes, there are certain routines that we go through, but there is something in every single day of your life that is something that you didn't notice before. And finding that and being able to appreciate it, hopefully is going to drive you to recognize how grand, how big, and how important your life is, regardless of how small you feel. So it's very difficult to have a positive outlook on anything when you're feeling hopeless, because that is the definition of hopeless. There's nothing. There's no hope. When you think about it every day, when you wake up every day, you feel like there's no hope. But it's in you. That hope is you, regardless of what other people think, regardless of what other people say, regardless of what your family and the closest people to you say. I'm telling you, you matter. And what they're saying to you in a negative manner isn't. It just isn't. Because, as I've said many times before, you don't know who you're going to become. You could be 60 years old listening to this and think that you know who you're going to become. But if you look back at your life, when you were 20, you didn't know what you were going to be doing or where you would be when you were 30. And if you were 30, you didn't know it at 40. And 40, you didn't know it at 50. And 50, you didn't know it at 60. Yes, we have routines. And yes, we have an idea of what we're going to go through on a daily basis. We don't, however, know what every single day is going to bring. And no, not every day is going to be perfect. Far from it. But being able to recognize the key things in our daily lives around us and in us help us get through those days that aren't as bright as the others. So I can't tell you that there's a magical way to get rid of hopelessness. I can tell you that the world is amazing, and I'm hoping that you're listening to the things that I say to help you kind of grow inside and around you to see that, so that you know that life and your life isn't hopeless. Your future isn't hopeless. The other one they mentioned is helpless. So when we think about helpless, we think about, where we are today, how we've gotten here, and maybe there are things that you've tried that haven't worked, and you think no matter what you try isn't going to work, and it leaves you feeling helpless. Or let's take this even a step further by stating, let's say that there's a bully or someone that picks on you all the time that maybe you even grew up with, and all of a sudden, this year or last year or however long ago, they've turned on you and they've started to pick on you or bully you or what have you. And maybe you have reached out to them outside of school, outside of social media, but just, you and them, and you've taken that step to go out of your way to just talk to them to find out what's going on, and it didn't get any better. That can make you feel helpless because you've looked inside, you've stepped out, and you've made an initiative to try to make things better, and they aren't, or they're not getting better. So you think, well, I've done what I can. There's nothing that's going to change, and you feel helpless. And again, we look inside and become depressed and suicidal and start having negative thoughts. So is there a direct answer for finding a way out of being helpless? Unfortunately, no, and that's going to go for all of these. However, there, again, just like everything, and I'll start repeating it, stop repeating it, but there, being able to look out and around and inside are key to that. Because it comes down to, helplessness comes down to not being able to overcome failure. So if we try things and we fail, most likely you're either at or coming to a point where you think that no matter what you do and try, it's not going to work and you just feel helpless. Again, as cliche as this sounds, and simple as it might sound, you don't know what tomorrow is going to be, or next year. I mean, you don't. That best friend that you grew up with that all of a sudden has turned on you and made your life a living hell over the last however long, maybe they end up going through something traumatic in their life. Maybe they lose a family member. Maybe there is divorce. Maybe, something traumatic. And when they look around to the friends they have now, and then they look at and reflect on their life and the friendships that they've had, they might come to realize that you, among several others, might be the closer people to them that they can relate to. And they might end up reaching out to you and eventually apologizing for what's happened. Another thing I can, from a personal experience, can tell you, there are people who end up finding support groups such as AA and NA, Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. Both of those have 12 steps, and through their whole process, one of them is making amends. Now, if you happen to be in middle school or high school, this might seem irrelevant, but I'm still using this as an example, again, because we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, next year, next 10 years, what have you, is going to bring. And the reason I bring this up is because programs such as that, as those as an example, talk about making amends, meaning being face to face or acknowledging the things that you've done in the past and the people you've hurt, and apologizing for those. So in this example, and again, I know it might not be tomorrow, but the point is that you might feel helpless, but you don't know what someone else is going through or going to go through, and what in return might come back years later to apologize. Now, of course, that doesn't help us right now through our depression and the suicidal thoughts and the feelings and negativity that we have and feel. But it's still nice to know that there are things we're not aware of, or you might not think that they would happen to you, and they leave you helpless. So my point of that story is, things might be dim, and no matter what you try, might seem like it might not work. But there are other factors that come into play. So everything you do might be right. The problem is, it usually involves other people, and we can't control other people. So, we put ourselves out there, we do all these things, we try our best, and yet bad things still happen to us. Yes, that does make us feel helpless. But knowing that there are other things in the world that can play a factor on that might come back to your benefit later. Another one on this list they list as powerless, which to me kind of coincides with helplessness. No matter what we do and try, we just feel like it's not working. And if we always look on the bright side of life, you never know what can happen. Uselessness, this is again, there's quite a many on this list, and it's already 35 minutes that I've gone into this. The last three are worthless, purposeless, and meaningless. And I'll, for the sake of time, kind of group these together. When we think about worthless, or even purposeless, and then that with meaningless, to me they all kind of ring the same. And by that, if we wake up every morning fearing what school is going to bring, work's going to bring, family's going to bring, it makes us feel worthless. And knowing that we can't necessarily or directly do anything about it, we might think, well, what's the purpose in getting out of bed? What's the purpose in going to school? What's the purpose of anything? And then we look at that with meaningless. Those three terms can really drive someone in a deep, dark hole. And you might experience thoughts that you just can't get out of your head, and ones that bring you to a deeper and darker place. So how do we get out of it? I think purposeless. If you've listened to all of my episodes, or at least some of them, obviously they all have an underlying statement. And this goes along with it. Of course, looking inside and finding who you are. Okay. But it's up to you to find a purpose. And if you could imagine a scenario or a day or a life where you didn't have any of these negative things coming at you, would you still have a purpose? Are the things that are happening to you right now preventing you from finding a purpose? And maybe you're at a point in your life where you don't even see a point of having a purpose. A purpose doesn't have to be something that you're acknowledged for. A purpose is something that you have internally that motivates you, that moves you. So when we think about, well, if we know how school is going to be, or work's going to be, or whatever situation it is, why get out of bed? Why get out? Why walk out the door? Why drive anywhere? Why do any of these things? It's not a lack of purpose. It's a lack of understanding you. Now I feel like I say that so much, you're probably cringing. I kind of do. But it's important to find a purpose. Now, the purpose is really for you. The purpose of purposeness is you. Let's say, okay, for me, one of the things that I did, of course, through all these, I say I love movies and music. I've always loved music. I've had a guitar since I was 8. Now, I didn't really know how to play until I was 10 or 11, and I essentially taught myself. But that was, for me at that time, my purpose. It did a number of things for me. One thing, it allowed me to not focus on all the negative crap that was coming at me and around me. It also provided me with an emotional outlet. When I play, And even when I was learning, I could the music and the notes just reverberated through me, and it was an emotional feeling, and so that helped me a lot. But with that, it also it was a challenge, right? Most people don't just pick up a guitar and can immediately play, or piano, or whatever it might be. But for me, that's what this was. I couldn't pick it up, and just start playing. It was something that I, even to this day, still practice with. But it does a lot of things for me. It allows me to, wipe my mind clean. It gives me an emotional outlet. It gives me time to focus on myself, and do something for me. And it can, this example can indirectly provide you with an outward purpose. Maybe if, again, just going with this as an example, so bear with me, but just living with this example, if, let's say that you become really good at guitar, then you find people who either like to listen to you play, or you have someone who wants you to teach them how to play. So then you end up having this indirect purpose. Now, it still started from within, because the purpose was finding you, dealing with your emotions, being able to, find a safe space for you to go and to grow and build and learn about yourself. But it also externally gave you a purpose in this example. So it could be whatever. But my point is, this all goes back to getting your feelings out. And not needing a cry for help, but you recognizing what's inside of you and being able to harness that and get it out on your own, and recognize who you are on your own, and building your own purpose and building your own self-esteem, and hopefully not being a statistic of these lists that indicate what makes people depressed, what makes people suicidal. Recognizing what you're going through can really help you grow, and being able to recognize these sooner, the easier it is for you to be able to change. So I feel like I'm wrapping this up quickly, but the reason that I had this as a primary topic is because, like I said, I think it's interesting when we start to have feelings we don't understand. Back in my day, we didn't have Google. You had a therapist, and all they had was books. So, it's a lot easier today to be able to, Google and do a search and try to learn about, or at least get an idea of what you're going through. But then we can become impacted by what we hear and see, and then we feel like we become a statistic. I'm here to tell you, you're not a statistic. You're not normal. That's not what I meant. You are not a normality in a statistic, right? So, as you go through this list, you might read and be like, oh, yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's me. But it could only be you because somebody else has put those words into you. It's important to find you. And that's what I want. I want you to think about not believing everything you read, and believe in what you hear in yourself, and getting your feelings out. So it's been almost 45 minutes. I appreciate you listening. I hope it was helpful. Again, you can always reach me at lifeliveseries@gmail.com. I do my best to be live every Tuesday and Friday at 9:30. But I hope you wake up tomorrow, or you look out the window today and feel good about you, because you should. I appreciate you, and you should appreciate yourself. Take care.